Let's go back to the good old days. Yes, that's right, our largely hormonal, pimple-popping, unwanted hair, wonderfully emotional teen years. But first, let's take a look at a couple brain scans. These two look pretty similar. There are little differences here and there, but overall, they look the same. These two actually represent a 6-year-old's brain and a teenager's brain, approximately at the age of 15. I want you to keep this image in mind as I tell you this next story. National Geographic writer David Dobbs has a 17-year-old son. About a year ago, David got a phone call from his son. He just wanted to let his father know that he had been at the state police barracks for a couple of hours. The police officer said that he was driving a little fast. David Dobbs' son had been driving down the highway at 113 miles per hour, enough to be considered a felony. Surprisingly enough, his son didn't make any objections to his punishments, but he did make one argument. He didn't like that one of his citations was for reckless driving. He claimed that, and I quote, "Reckless sounds like you're not paying attention, but I was. I made a deliberate point of doing this on an empty stretch of dry interstate in broad daylight with good sightlines and no traffic. I mean, I wasn't just gunning the thing, I was driving. I guess that's what I want you to know. If it makes you feel any better, I was really focused." David Dobbs paused. For some reason, he did feel better, but he didn't understand why. Now, let's recap. We know that this teen knows he was traveling 113 miles per hour on a highway and even agrees that the cop was right to pull him over. But he does not deem it fair to be charged with reckless driving. But he said he was focused and knew what he was doing. He was just driving. So what's missing, you ask? Well, the answer is his brain. A study conducted by the National Institute of Health completed a series of scans of developing adolescent brains. They found that our brain experiences a huge reorganization period between the ages of 12 and 25. Now, reorganization doesn't mean it's growing, it just means it's remodeling. Think of this reorganization period as creating a blueprint. You need to map out where everything is going to be, how big or small it's going to be, the materials you need, etc. Once the blueprint is finalized, then you can start building. Our brains reach 90% of its full size by age 6. And if you think your head is still growing after that, well, you're wrong. It's actually just your skull thickening. Our brains develop from the back to the front, meaning that the parts of our brains that deal with emotion, memory, learning, motivation, and judgment are the very last functions to fully develop once we hit our 20s. So, you're at the annual holiday office party. Everyone's having a good time. You've had a few drinks, you're cracking jokes, you have a couple more drinks, and you're feeling pretty good. And then your boss comes up to you and asks you to make a speech. Shit. You don't think twice about it. You think, well, I can't say no to my boss. You get yourself together in the 2 minutes you have to walk up to the front of the party and get everyone's attention. You begin your speech, everything seems normal, you're making people laugh, and you hear a round of applause and get back to the party. What you don't know is that people knew you were drunk. They heard you slur a little, they saw you trip as you were walking off. The alcohol impaired your brain in 2 areas. 1, your decision to make the speech in the first place, and 2, the act of giving your speech. It is these 2 moments where your brain doesn't turn back, just like Dobbs' son. He made the decision to drive fast and didn't think twice about it when it was happening. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, I'm not going to tell you that parents need to be easier and more understanding of their kids, or that teens should use this information as an excuse so they can do something stupid and be like, but mom, I'm a teen, I'm not fully developed, remember? No. Instead, I want you to think about your judgment skills and how you judge certain situations. Why do you judge them the way you do? And then I want you to think about when you've had a couple drinks. How do you act? How is it different from a sober, rebellious teenager?